All right, title company. We've talked a little bit about the role of the title company. You actually can use these guys a little differently, and things have changed. RESPA's killed a lot of people. You guys are being new, haven't had the ability that title companies used to do marketing for you. A lot of them can't or won't anymore, because they have names of owners, of homeowners, and you used to be able to do what they call co-op mailing. They pay for the names and you pay for the card and yada, 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 and they will then mail them out so that you guys can send out to them. But now the title company, obviously, do a TBD is the best thing. And we've talked about this before. You guys should order that TBD, the to be determined, because you don't have a buyer. Right? When do you guys typically order your title work? For those of you that have ordered title work. After you got an accepted offer. That's one way to think about it. What's the downside to after? Do what? I can't hear you. It delays it. Probably not much, because it should only take three or 4 days. Well, in a scenario of where it's a cash offer, that you're right, that might be a delay, because cash literally can theoretically close tomorrow. And that goes back to the old, 3 days kind of thing. But what's the big, let's assume there's not a lot that are in cash. What's the a little bit about it, plus tax. What's the worst thing about ordering title work after you get a purchase agreement? In case there's something wrong, you guys haven't hit on the one that I like.
I guess if you put their name on it and they don't go through, you've got a title that you have to reorder because you've corrected.
Okay, we'll quit guessing. All those are right answers, but that's not what I'm thinking. Because the biggest problem is, and the one I ran into, is when you get an offer for 100 and you do the title work and you realize the guy owns 104. I've had that happen many times, where your seller tells you, oh yeah, I got a loan from Fifth Third for $100,000. I've made 5 payments, so I owe like $96,000. And you do the math and you get the offer in at $97,500. And what he forgot to tell you was that he hadn't made a payment in 6 months, so now he's got late fees and the attorney fees they've tacked on it. So he actually owes $101. And I've had that where people owe more money than they actually borrowed because of late fees. You've got an accepted purchase agreement at $97,000. And he owes 101. That's a problem. That's literally the exact numbers of one that I had. Now, in my particular case, the guy actually was able to come up with the $4,000 and we closed, but he was upside down based on because he had forgot. Yeah, I've made a couple payments, but he forgot to tell me that it's been months since he made those payments, and now he had late fees. So that's the biggest problem is, A, something pops up like Brent McLaren's where there was stuff on it, or you didn't get enough money. That's the worst case.
Because you're saying that when you list a house, you should go ahead and do.
Right. So now there's another way is the day you list it. When you list it, though, you have to get what's called a TBD title, to be determined, because they don't know the buyer's name. And they always run a title search on the person, seller, and the property, and they also run a search on the buyer in case there's no judgments or liens against the buyer. Remember that section in the book we talked about that would attach to your person? Well, they can't do that if you don't know who the buyer is. So they actually only run the owner's policy, and they call it a TBD. But we did that with just the last listing. And we did find all that stuff that popped up that from Brent's 2005 issues that hadn't been removed, and we removed them before we even got an offer on the property. All right? Here's the downside to doing it when you list, though. Remember, the buyer can come in and want to use the title work. So if the buyer on the house I'm getting ready to close would have said, I want to use security title, we've already have Chicago Title has done all that work, cleared those liens and all of that. So now we would have to move the title company or move the title over to another company And that's where we get into that. Have we talked? I thought we've talked about this. Okay. Or you could have two title companies. I could keep mine at Security or Chicago, and they could keep theirs. So that's the downside to this. The downside to this is you could have the wrong price. So there's upsides and downsides to both of them. You probably should just understand who is, and you put an order in, and then they send you back the commitment and any of the exceptions unless they find something, and then you have to work with your client to find it if there's clear any of the sections. All right, the role of the lender is usually the spoiler. That's wrong. Yeah. I think Dave and I were talking the other day about why are pre-approvals actually worthless pretty much anymore. You can get pre-approval versus pre-qualification versus all of those, right? Pre-qual is where they just get an approval based, I don't want to use that word. They get a letter based on mythical numbers. Somebody calls in and says, I want to get a loan, and they say, what do you make? I make $100,000 a year, and I've got no pay bills, and they say, okay, you should be able to buy a $200,000 house. A pre-approval is where they prove all of that. They have to prove they make the $100,000 a year. So the pre-qualification letter is a mythical, yeah, if you told me everything you told me is correct, then you should be able to do this. So pre-qual letters don't even really, I haven't even seen them in a long time. Now everybody wants them to be pre-approved. Any questions on lenders? Half the class didn't show up today, I noticed, or a third. Again, but we're not bitter.
Someone that I've never worked with, and they just can't get into the process
Yeah.
right now.
Remember, there's a difference between, we actually didn't distinguish it there on the chart. There's a difference between the true word lender, and the other word, mortgage broker. Right? Mortgage brokers, while I like them, are the ones that panic me the most. Because like you said, you get some guy that maybe was a mortgage broker for a dozen years that goes out and starts his own company, and you don't even really know who that is. So you've got to trust this new guy. Can he get the work done? Whereas a lender, you usually, hey, I've heard of Bank of America before. I'm pretty sure that they can get it done if they say they can get it done. So you got to be careful. Are you dealing with a mortgage broker or are you dealing with a lender? Somebody here talked about Hallmark Home Mortgage the other day. Remember, they're both. Some companies can be both. That would be smart. I mean, hey, if it's a really easy deal, I'll use my money. If it's maybe a hairy deal, I'm going to use someone else's money, which is what they do. Nothing wrong with that business model, I guess, but so keep that in mind. There is a difference between the lender and the mortgage broker. I like mortgage brokers because it helps your client, one application, talk to a lot of different people. The other advantage is 90% of the time I've got Jake's phone number and I know where Jake lives and Jake's home number. If something happens, I can call him on a Sunday evening and go, what the heck's going on? Where Bank of America, you can't. So that's always a problem too. The role of the listing broker, remember our role is really, actually the house I'm getting ready to close with a buddy of mine, he's been my friend for a bunch of years. He asked me when he listed the house, he said, what are you going to do to sell my house? And I kind of shocked him. I said, nothing, because I'm the listing broker. The listing broker just makes the house available. He goes, but if a buyer calls you, well, if a buyer calls me, I may show him the house, but I won't be a listing broker. At that point, I'd be a selling broker. Or in my particular case, I'd be a limited broker. But as a listing broker, all we do is put the house in the MLS. We don't really market for buyers. if you're marketing for a buyer for your house, you're actually working in the realm of a selling broker. Because listing brokers just put stuff in Craigslist and on the MLS and on Zillow and all of that. If I'm talking to a buyer about coming to look at the listing, that's a selling agent's job or a selling broker's job. It's kind of funny. And he's like, well, I don't get it. Never mind. I'm just giving him a hard time. What are you smiling for, Cheshire Cat? Back there.
We've got a house listed and we went and listed the house. We talked to the buyer or the seller, and they said, what are you going to do? And I said, we're going to put you out there so people will know that you're interested in selling the house. I said, what are you going to do? And she goes, well, what do you think I need to do? So we talked about some things. And the other day, we've had 2 open houses and 19 showings, and we haven't had an offer on it yet. And so she goes, what are you guys going to do to my house, or sell my house? And I said, did you do the things we talked about when we came out
Yeah.
to do the listing?
Oops.
What? But you told us you were going to retile the entryway, and you didn't do that the last time we were there for the open house. And you told us you were going to do this, and you hadn't done that yet. So my question to you is, what are you going to do to sell your house?
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing the stuff that happens. And a lot of people, what's the old, I don't know, you can beat your head, pound foolish, what is it? Something wise, pound foolish, something wise, I don't know. Can't see the forest for the trees, all that. We've had buyers all the time that are like that won't paint the house. They would much rather give a credit for painting. And you have a hard time explaining to a seller that literally people have a hard time picturing that in their head. It's hard for a buyer to walk into a house and look at a house and stand in the hallway and see the Pepto-Bismol pink daughter's room, the black 16-year-old son's bedroom, you know, it's pitch black and all that, and then the seafoam grain, and go, oh, well, we'll give them a credit so they can repaint it. No, just repaint it. Because they can't see that neutral, and they go, oh, this is terrible. Looks like Walt Disney threw up in here, you know.
Or it makes the room, it's dark, and it makes the room really small and dark, and
Yeah.
they don't see it for what it could be.
But I love those. I know I've told you guys all heard my 72 lawn ornament story. Yeah, that's a prime example. They just, you know, they thought because they loved all those lawn ornaments in the yard that the buyer would as well, not realizing that it was actually causing more problem than it was good. And once, like Dave said, once we got the lawn ornaments out of the yard and then subsequently out of the house, which is where they moved them to, and packed up, we got offered at full price offer too. The problem was the yard was dead. I meant the yard looked dead because you had all the circle spots in the yard. But it was fall time, so that was going to be a situation that came back. But as a listing broker, it's part of your job to help, like Dave said, guide that seller down that path of, you know, I know your house is nice, but 312 Hummels on your living room fireplace mantle ain't going to cut it, which I've seen that too. This lady had all those Hummels all over her house. You know, those need to go away. Oh, but they're pretty. I understand that. It's not going to work. Then on the other side of that, you've got the buyer's broker, or the selling broker is the more apt term, even though you worked under a buyer agent. This is the one. The reason it's called selling broker is because you are the one that is selling the house to your client. And you guys need to do that. One of the things when I teach my agents something, I always tell them, what's the first thing the waitress says to you when you come and want to eat? She comes up and says, can I get you something to drink? Can I get you something to eat? What would you like to eat? They literally ask for the order. As a selling agent, we have a hard time doing that. And what I think that you guys need to learn to do is create what's called a bridge. you need to bridge that client to that house. And you would do that like, oh, you said you wanted a bedroom for every child. Here's a 4-bedroom house. Isn't this what you were looking for? And get them to go, oh, yeah, it is. You've created the bridge. Didn't you have tell me that you're a piano player and you have a grand piano? Wouldn't it look great sitting in this big foyer? Oh, yes, it would. Is there no reason we shouldn't write an offer today? I literally use that statement all the time. You can't just stand there and walk around with and wait for them to go, okay, I want you to write me an offer. You may like it, but you can't, or you shouldn't. All right? So you've got to learn to ask for that order as the selling agent. Is there no reason that we shouldn't write an offer? Well, yes, I wanted 4-car garage. This is 2. Oh, well, then we need to refine our search because everything we're going to look for is 2-car garage today. You didn't tell me that. Now we can stop, refine the search, go again tomorrow.